Welcome to the Meaningful Happiness Podcast with Dr. Scott Concrete. On today's episode, we discuss love and affect. Scott is joined by Kay, Greg, Alex, and Hayat. We hope you enjoy the show and thank you for listening.
Hello everyone, Scott Concrete here, founder of Meaningful Happiness, and a podcast that we're doing which is about meaning and happiness and finding out what elements make meaning and make happiness happen. Because if somebody knew by now, they would have a Nobel Prize, right? We are not claiming that we know the answers to that. In fact, part of my premise is that it's everybody's job to do the work to find out what's meaningful and happy, what meaningfulness and happiness is for them. And we're going to try to give you some goals because we have really wonderful talent right here, my team. And I'm going to have them introduce themselves before we start. But I want to let you know we're talking about a very exciting subject tonight that I know will interest you, which of course is love. And everybody here knows all about that. They have all the answers. So by the end of the podcast, you will be so informed. If nothing else, you'll enjoy the journey, I hope. So again, I'm Dr. Scott Concrete, sometimes called the Affect Doc. And I'm the founder of Meaningful Happiness and the Relationship Workshops. And this is podcast, I think, number 6 or 7. I can't remember, but whatever number it is, happy to be here and talk about affect relational theory, and tonight about love. So to my left is...
I'm Greg.
Say a little bit about yourself, Greg. we know you're Greg.
I'm Greg Nance.
Okay.
No.
What's your favorite color?
Green.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I don't know what else to really say about myself other than I enjoy these podcasts.
What do you do? What do you do for a living?
What do
you do for me? What do you do for this team?
What do I do for a living? Well, I'm in diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Got it.
And also human resources.
Great.
And I'm still trying to figure out what I do for the team.
I thought you were project manager. That's
is
what I'm
that
paying
it?
you for, right?
Okay. I'm trying to be a project manager.
All right.
If I can just get it all together. Yeah, and that's a little bit about me. Currently looking for a job because I was laid off and looking to move into DE&I or HR. And it's life. It happens. So you deal with it and you move on.
We're putting the message out there right now, so
Thank you.
might get manifested. Who knows?
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Alex. I'm working for Scott to help produce this podcast and doing some things to manage his websites.
Excellent. Glad to have you here.
Hi, I'm Hayat, and I'm working with Scott as the social media manager, and I also have my Master's of Public Health.
Hi, I'm Kay. I am a doctoral student in clinical psych, training to become a psychologist like Dr. Scott here, and I'm the brand manager. I just make sure things look good, so I hope things look good.
And they do.
And they do. I am very proud of everybody around me right now, and I'm so excited to have them as part of my podcast because everybody has a lot to say. I'm going to start by asking my team here how they would define love. And I'm going to respond to that after they do. By the way, there's no right or wrong. This is not a quiz. This is not a test. Nobody passes or fails or anything like that. But we all have preconceived notions. Not preconceived notions. We've grown up with different ideas about what love is. And one thing that I want to do is challenge some of those notions about what love is. Because if we don't challenge them, we're not only going to have false expectations about what can happen in a relationship, we're going to have false expectations about what the other person can do for us, but we're going to have false expectations about ourselves as well. And so one of the things I believe very strongly about affect theory and affect relational theory is that it really provides some tools to be able to love oneself better and to love others better. I have my own crazy notions about love, but I'm curious about what your crazy notions about love are. By the way, I just want to tell you, Freud, if you don't know this, said that love was a psychotic state. Which maybe starting with that, but it kind of can be, depending on what type of love you're talking about. So that's one of the nuances. But I'm just going to open it up to, what is love?
That's been the age-old question for me. I don't know. I really don't. I don't know what love is.
Is it a feeling? Is it a thought?
I mean, I love my family most of the time. No, I do. I love my friends very much. But in terms of how I ever been in love, maybe once.
Okay.
And it was just the typical feeling where you have the butterflies in your stomach and you just want to see this person all the time and you thinking about them and you want to be with them all the time. And one of my love languages, my main love language is touch. So I'm just always touching and from a loving standpoint. And I don't know, that's just, I'm rambling here, but I still struggle with what is love for me. I don't know. I'm
So
still
in the
trying to
case
figure
of
it out.
intimate love, in case of romantic love, it's a bunch of pixie dust that makes you feel like this person is somebody you want to touch nonstop.
Yeah, for me, like the whole world could be imploding, and as long as you're with this person, everything's okay. That's kind of how I think about it.
Okay.
Or there's this De Beers commercial. You remember those De Beers commercials? And the lady's holding her man, and she's like, I love this man. I just love, love, love this man. I know that's cheesy, but that's kind of, I always thought, wow, that's what I would want.
Okay. Nothing wrong with that. Is that Hayat? Is that your idea too?
I think I agree with a lot of what Greg said, but for me personally, I have never experienced romantic love or being in love, so I don't know that aspect of it. But I think for like the love I have for my friends and my family, I think it's just this strong connection or bond that may be built of like similar or shared experiences, but also it's one where like I can't imagine my life without them, without like what they have added to my life or without like having their perspective in my life. So I think like, I don't know, when I think about it, that is one way I think I can frame the people I love versus like people I like or like, you know, my acquaintances. I think that's like maybe something that like differentiates those bonds.
I like that. So far, I just want to point out that with the feeling, the subjective feeling of being in love, there's safety. There's a sense that if you didn't have your family and friends, it wouldn't be a meaningful and happy world, right? That would be pretty traumatic to not have them. And the fantasy is that if you had this wonderful, idyllic person, all obstacles could be faced together, and the world could be imploding, and it would be a nice implosion because you're going to be doing it together. Okay, so you're not alone. That's a big part of the sense of romantic love, but I think it's also part of familial, parental love and so forth. Is that you have somebody there that makes your life meaningful. It's safe, right? So happiness and meaning go with safety in many ways, and predictability, right? Like the wonderful thing about family is that they will always be there to some degree. They're alive, you know. They're always going to be in your life in some ways. The worst thing about family is they're always going to be there in your life, right? So it's a double-edged sword, and I'm saying that humorously, but they're a struggle at times.
But it's also the people who have known you since birth, usually. So like,
Well, your parents certainly.
your parents or like sometimes an older sibling and stuff have been there from birth, and so you have known them pretty much your whole life.
Right.
So in a way, it's like you don't know anything other than them, and I'm already getting in it with my cynicism. Probably the most cynical romantic out there. But no, I'm just getting at the point of like, I feel like love, it's both a choice and it's not a choice. I feel like with family, maybe it's less of a choice, but I mean, you still make that choice to have family in your life. Like we take that for granted, but you really don't have to. You can choose how close you want to be to people in your life or not, whether that's family, friends, etc.
I think that brings up the topic of sometimes people do want to be mothers or parents for the sake of having this person, this child that's gonna love them no matter what. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes when people have children, they have this expectation that their child is gonna love them no matter what, without any conditions or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So that goes to your point of sometimes there isn't a choice really, but when you think about it from the parents' side, sometimes they expect this unconditional love from their children.
Yeah. I think a lot of kids, I think we all know that our parents should love us unconditionally, but I don't think kids think about, their parents having the same expectation of them, which can be different. It can be difficult, I think, when you're not clear on that. Because I don't know, it's there's the love that you have for people just because, like you're saying, they're in your life forever, and they've been there for you and been good for you, but what do you do when the people that are supposed to love you hurt you? What do you do with the people that you love, cause you harm? And how do you choose to, stay there for that love that's there, or maybe not, and maybe, pursue something else?
You've gone way too deep, way too fast.
As I tend to do.
Which I love you for. Those are wonderful issues. I think both of you, everyone so far has brought up the complexity of what love is. So with parents, I have a child. Is she required to love me? I don't think so. I'm not sure, but I would hope she loves me. I believe she does. I love her.
You're not required to love your family. It's just a family we're born into, and hopefully you will love your family, but just because they're your blood doesn't mean you have to love them. As a friend once told me.
I don't know if it's something that can be required.
I don't believe it can be required. I think that I have to earn that through my relationship with her as I would with anybody else.
Mm-hmm. You can't force somebody to have a feeling about you.
Mm-hmm. Right. So this is where affects come in. What are those feelings that create love? So when you think of parents and you think of family and so forth, you have a lot of commonality, right? So you have a lot of shared interests. And they're also safe, going back to this issue of safety, enjoyment, the affect of enjoyment, joy, which is one of the two positive affects that we have. So again, for those of you just joining in to affect theory, there are 9 affects. Sylvan Tompkins, being the founder of affect theory, tended to like to have them on a continuum. So many of the affects he puts on like fear, terror. For the 2 positives, it's interest, excitement, and the second one is enjoyment, joy. The enjoyment is really one, when you see infants, for instance, toddlers and babies and toddlers, it's that big beaming smile where they know that they're just delighted to be with you. It's a safe world. Everything feels good. There's no poopy diaper. There's no hunger. There's no sickness or things like that. They're just in a good place. You can think evolutionarily that when you're inside the cave or inside the tent or inside wherever, and all the bad things are out there, you're with family and people you love in a safe environment. And you can relax. And go, we can all smile together, have a meal. Because you can't really have a meal when you're out fighting. Okay, so mealtime is a safe time most of the time, unless you're in complete distress and unless it's terror, right? You're going to eat only for nourishment in wartime, things like that. But normally, eating is a family activity or with close people you care about, and it means that it's safe.
Ideally.
Interest, excitement is what when you find somebody that you really think is amazing. When you meet somebody, whether it's a friend, whether it's a romantic interest or not, when you find somebody that you think he or she is so cool, you want to know all about them. Hey, let's go for a cup of coffee. Tell me about you. Oh, that really? You've been there too? Like you read that book? Oh, well, you're studying psychology? What theoretical model are you following? That sort of stuff. When we meet somebody, that's what we want to do. We want to, the affect, there's a biological, neurological wiring that we have that gets us to go out into the world and learn about things. This is what infants and toddlers do. They're always getting into trouble. Why do you think you lock the cabinets? So they don't drink lye and poison and things like that, because they're curious. They want to know about everything. How do you teach? So what I should say? What's in place given this biological impetus to go out there and be curious? What helps the human say, "Oh, I shouldn't be interested in that"?
I'm guessing the negatives.
The negative affects. Okay, so
The icks.
I pick this up. It is poison. I spit it. I taste it, and it tastes like puke or it tastes horrible. I'll spit it out. There'll be the affect of dismell if it's stinky, or disgust if it tastes bad. And I just learned, don't do that. Yeah, we're not doing that one anymore. In relationships, the barrier to positive connection is shame. It's not about doing something shameful. It could be that you did something shameful, depending on the culture that you're in and so forth. The bottom line is, at an evolutionary, biological basis, as well as a narrative basis, if you do something in which the other person that you want connection with says, you're going to have a reaction that's usually called a shame-based reaction. You're going to lower your head. You're going to get frumpy, what I call the shrug of shame, which is a signal that says, "Oh, I've done something that's not allowing me to connect. I just told you to go to bed. If I have to tell you one more time, oh, all right." We have to do that to train kids. In a loving relationship, when you disappoint your parents, or your partner says, "I don't like when you do that," it's teaching us that we have to do something different to make that relationship work. So it's a normal reaction. How do you normally think of shame when you think of relationships? Because most people don't. Interestingly, shame is the number one problem in relationships. But right now, psychologically, in the therapeutic field, we don't talk about shame in that way that I know of. That shame is, when people come in and say that they're having a problem, a couple's having a problem, or kids are having a problem with the parents have problems with kids, it's usually not talked about as a shame-based issue, when in fact it is. It is usually not talked about as an affective disorder, when in fact it is. 90% more, I'm just making it up, a large percentage of depression and anxiety is shame-based.
Well, it seems like shame is at the base of every negative issue. As I think back, like being laid off from a job, there's a lot of shame because even if you didn't do anything wrong, it still feels like you failed, which feels like it's shaming, or if a relationship doesn't work out, then you begin to shame yourself or think you did something wrong.
Right. Because there was a barrier to what you wanted. You wanted that job. You wanted that relationship.
Yeah, so I think that's a natural cause, and maybe people just don't think of it in those terms, but I think that's a normal part of any negative situation that comes up.
Exactly. So the point that I'm trying to make with this is that thinking about it from a shame-based perspective, from an affect relational perspective, is a lot simpler. So as a therapist, I can get to the issues faster. When you're thinking, as lay people, why is my relationship not working? Why do I feel so bad when he or she doesn't call me back or text me and I really wanted that connection that way? Well, you're probably going to slump, like when it's time to go to bed and they didn't respond to you. You're like, well, maybe they'll call tomorrow. That's a biological, involuntary response, is what I'm trying to stress, to not getting what you want positively. The problem is that by the time you're 11, 12, or whatever and up, you've had numerous experiences of disappointment, shame, relationship problems, family issues, hopes dashed, whatever, that flood you because of the biological trigger. So the important thing for me is to help people understand, hey, pay attention to the shame affect, biological trigger, so that you know not to get triggered with not get flooded with all the rest of the stuff. That the biological response is normal.
But it's hard for a lot of people to get to that point, right? And to figure that out.
Well, if they don't know the theory, they won't know.
Yeah, but even naturally, sometimes people don't know how to get there, even without knowing the theory, because it doesn't come natural for a lot of people. It's a learned behavior almost. At least it seems that way to me.
Well, the affect is not learned. That's my big point. The affect is not learned. The emotional response is learned.
That's what I'm talking about, the emotional response.
So you can change their emotional response. That is, in therapy, that's something you can change. I cannot change your biological wiring around the affect. Mm-hmm. Okay?
I mean, you're getting at when we rationalize our feelings. I think the point you're making is that our emotions are, and what even Greg is saying is that our emotions are learned. Mm-hmm. And like you're saying, you'll have the negative affect or whatever, the dismell, distaste, shame, but you might not know why you feel that way. So then that's when the emotion comes in. Well, I've decided that it must be because I'm really jealous of so-and-so, or it must be whatever specific reason. But then it's interesting because it's like, when you go back to the affect and you get to whatever it is, the root of like, oh, well, this person like is disgusting to me, or like they're dismelling to me, or what have you, it really does say a lot. 'Cause I don't know, it just makes me think about like, you'll date somebody and you'll be like, there's something about this person, I should like them, but they're giving me the ick. And I don't know why they're giving me the ick.
Pay attention to that.
Yeah, pay attention to that. Like kind of trace it backwards. Like, what is it specifically? Is it the way that they chew their food, or is it the way that they dismiss your ideas? Like, all of those things. I think that's the benefit of affect. Is like you can get to the bottom of things. What's really bothering you?
When you go to a restaurant, I had a friend that just went to some island in the Caribbean, and everybody ordered the same thing. And two of them ate it, and two of them didn't, because the two that didn't eat it went, there's something off about it. Mm-hmm. And the other two were too hungry, and they just like went ahead and did it. Well, the two that didn't eat it were fine the next day. You can imagine where I'm going with the story. I think it's sort of like the same thing with a relationship. If it feels a little off, it's probably not a good thing for you. Mm-hmm. It's probably going to make you sick in the morning, so to speak. Along the lines of when you meet somebody, the language that we use when we're in love or really into somebody is, I could just gobble you up, or I could just gobble her up, or I could just gobble him up. You want to take them in. You want to ingest them. When things go south, what do you say? You make me want to puke. You're disgusting. You're sick. you're a piece of shit. I want you out of my body. Mm-hmm. So the metaphors around the affects tell us, inform us about what we're feeling. Mm-hmm. Pay attention to that. They're bodily metaphors. You know, the things that you want to say. I'm not quite sure about this relationship, but when all my dreams are about vomiting. I'm just making that up, but you know what I'm saying? Pay attention to that dream. Mm-hmm. So along those lines, when I think of you, Hayat, and your family, I picture a really warm family, really enjoying themselves and showing lots of interest in what you're doing. Maybe I'm idealizing your family. But from the outside, it sounds like you enjoy that and you can count on their being interested in you.
Yeah.
And enjoying you. Mm-hmm. they don't, when you come home, they don't say that you're a piece of shit.
No.
Okay.
They ask about everything and anything.
All right. But you'd rather that than they're not.
Yeah. I do think that, like, sometimes there are different ways of showing your love, and for them it's interest, but also in a way of, like, you know, showing that they care about you by being very much like, okay, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And questioning a lot of stuff. And sometimes that can feel like helicopter parenting at times. But I think it's more about, like, showing their love by showing that, like, we care about everything you do and want to be part of it as much as we can.
Part of caring, so we'll go back to interest and interest, excitement. That includes care, curiosity, desire, interest, of course. All those things that bring you close to somebody. They bring proximity. In a healthy relationship, especially in a healthy long-term relationship with somebody, whether it's family or a romantic one, if you know me well, and I walk in after a long day, you might know from the look of my face that I need some time. And you're responding to me like, hey, looks like you had a hard date. You want some time by yourself? Do you want? And I say yes. You're showing that you care by giving me space.
Right. I think this, like, is an area where boundaries come into play, and respecting those is very important, because my parents are kind of similar in the sense that they sort of maybe tend to pry, or they get a little bit too interested in my life. And, you know, sometimes you want them to back off a little bit, and you have to communicate that to them and hope that they respect that.
That's exactly what I'm getting at. So being an intrusive parent doesn't work. Sometimes just hanging out with them and not asking questions, but being open to having a conversation is going to probably give you more than if you ask, how was your day? How was school? Fine.
How many people get caught up in that cycle? Like every sitcom. That's the dynamic between the parents and the kids. Parents are prying and the kids are over it. It's kind of sad. I've been watching The Sopranos lately, and like the kids in that show, it's good. The kids in that show have that same kind of thing where it's like Tony and Carm want to be like in their life, like, you know, they struggled, and so I think it comes from that too, of like your parents love you so much and like they've been through so much hardship, they just want to make sure you're not going through the same, so they're prying in, but you're like, I'm just trying to live. Like, first of all, I'm just trying to live. Second of all, sometimes I tell you things and you react in a way that I don't want to deal with. So you just shut down, and then it leads to where the kids are feeling like disconnected from the parents, and the parents are feeling disconnected from the kids, and like no one really knows how to what is the word, bridge that gap.
Yep.
Well, that's like, you mentioned sitcoms. That's like the main premise of like most sitcoms is that they don't communicate properly. Like all of these crazy antics or issues that they get into would just be alleviated by,
Communication.
right, like
Yep.
not inviting the boss over for dinner, but there's some like weird situation going on in the house. Kind of a bad example, but I find I definitely do have a lot of issues in relationships, communicating my boundaries and setting boundaries, because that can feel intimidating sometimes. You don't want to bring up to your partner or the person in your life that you care about that you're displeased with something they're doing, or that you, I don't know, I guess expressing your needs.
Or that like you're rebuking like their interest, like
Yeah.
Right.
you don't want to make it seem as though like, oh, like I don't want you to show any sort of like curiosity or interest about me, but you want to limit it a little. But I think sometimes it's also different person to person. I think that also sometimes goes back to like love languages of like the way I handle the way my parents like react to things and the way my siblings see it are different. Like they may want to set like stronger boundaries with my parents than I may want to. Like I may be more okay with it than they are, just because like, the way we accept love is also a little different person to person, I think.
Yeah.
It's a good point. I'd like to clear something up. I forget who came up with the love language stuff. My patients bring it up all the time. It's pretty common for people to use that. From affect relational theory point of view, there are only two affects that encompass love. Okay, so there are really only two love languages, which is interest, excitement, enjoyment, joy. If there's a problem in your relationship, and actually, Alex, this interesting thing about boundaries goes back to shame as well. So I'm going to try to weave this as best I can, sticking first to the love language part, which is having to tell somebody, you're asking me a million questions when I come home, gets on my nerves and kind of pushes, like, just leave me alone. Like, I want you around, but not when you do it that way, But it's also like if somebody's giving you a massage, and you don't like the way they're touching you, you're softer. Okay, it's the same sort of thing. Just say like, you just calm down.
Yeah.
Just be with me. Just shut up, and just hang out with me. The fear of sharing that often is that the person is going to have a reaction that's going to cause you shame. That there's going to be a disconnection with that person, as opposed to they're saying, hey, I get really enthusiastic. I was missing you. I could jump all over. I could gobble you up right now. And you clearly don't want to be gobbled up right now. We're in two different places, but we still love each other. We still care about each other. I needed to have that information.
It never goes that way. How do you get it to go that way?
So from like an...
I hope we can go differently. Okay, Alex, I'm sorry.
Conversation, yeah.
So from like an ART perspective, what is a kind of good way to deal with that shame that you feel, or that anxiety you might have about bringing up things like that?
Thank you. That's a great question. I first want to say that I've been doing therapy for 30 some years, so having difficult conversations with people in clinical practice, as well as in romantic relationships. I have a personal life and intimate life myself. It never gets easy.
No.
Okay?
Yay.
Difficult conversations are difficult conversations, right? What I do know is that there are ways that work better than others for me to get my needs met in a relationship. For me to say just very honestly, I always start with a positive. I want to stay connected with you. I really love our time together. I just want to remind you, you're wonderful. Like, I love you. You're great. I don't think you understand sometimes what it's like for me to come home and after seeing all these patients, like needing some time, I pick up your enthusiasm. I know it comes from a good place. I brought this up a couple times about you needing to like, tone it down a little bit, and you're not toning it down. And I feel like I'm going to start getting more distressed and maybe even angry and resentful if we don't work this out. Do you want to work this out with me? Because I don't think it's an issue about love. I don't think it's not an issue about interest, excitement, enjoyment. It's an issue about how to manage all the other stuff in between.
Right. If the interest excitement wasn't there, you probably wouldn't try to deal with it in the first place.
Exactly. So you want to stress with that person. There's all this good stuff. These other small things are just things that are getting in the way.
I do worry, though, that by bringing up a positive thing every time you have an issue, you're sort of conditioning your partner to be anxious, like about if you...
When you do say positive things,
Yeah.
they're like, what is it going to be? What did I do wrong?
Fair enough. By the way, I'm it's kind of staged the way I'm framing it. We could do some scenarios in which I think it would be more realistic because you're right. But you do want to say, hey, I can even do it with an irritated way. Hey, listen, give me some time. But let's come back and talk about, by the way, when we do come back and talk about it, I might be even agitated. This is the fourth time that we've talked about this. I feel there's a great relationship, but you're fucking it up right now. It is getting on my nerves. What can we do about it? What is it about my coming home that you want to jump all over me and not give me time?
I want to switch it
So-
because I think we talk about the perspective of the person who has to set the boundaries all the time, especially in our individualistic American culture. Like we're all about cutting people off right now. We're all about protecting our peace. So I know that people feel empowered to do that, at least a little bit more than they did maybe 10 or 20 years ago. But let's put ourselves in the perspective of the person who has to hear this, even if they are the one in the wrong, because they are the one who's doing the thing that's hurting you or whatever. But can we put ourselves into the psyche of that person? What are they hearing when we say these things, and how can we say it in a way that is palatable to them? Even though I don't know, there's tons of people in my life who are like this, and it's like, why do I have to keep tempering my feelings to make you feel good or whatever? But I guess that's important for relationships. So it's like, I don't know.
Does that only happen to you in relationships or everywhere? Like in just like at school, at work, or?
Yeah, but it's like with those situations, I expect it to be that way. So it's like this is just part of the territory of having to have a job or whatever, having to go to school. But I think when you get to the friendships and the dating relationships, it's like, well, I should just be able to be my truest self with you, and that's not always going to be a pleasant person. But I also get that I need to be pleasant to you if I want you to continue, if I like to engender positive feelings in the relationships. So I guess how do we have more compassion for the person that we're having to have these conversations with? Or do you get what I'm saying? Y'all know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a hard balance to maintain.
Yeah.
But I guess that's part of setting your boundaries too. If you're constantly feeling like you have to sacrifice something of yourself to accommodate other people.
Maybe that's relationships, though. I mean, there's got to be a degree of give and take. So I guess coming back to and we're also speaking to something of there are people in our lives who are clingy, or people in our lives who have anxious attachments, and so they're always gonna you choose to be in a relationship with someone with anxious attachments, that's how they are. So it's how do you work with that person?
I'm curious because I don't feel like I need to answer that directly, but I think that'd be a great thing to come back to. Did you have a reaction to my raising my voice and being when asked about how I might do it in a cranky way? Because
no, I'm often the cranky one.
Okay.
I am that person, and I've had I'll feel like an asshole, It's
So you heard yourself in me a little bit there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I don't know, there's a person in my life who I feel like I don't have a ton of patience for, but I do love this person a lot. And so I'll feel like an asshole when I have a cranky reaction that is justified. But I want to do that less. Because, I don't know, it gets into this dynamic where it's one is the pursuer and one is the...
Distancer, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'll be the distancer. And from my perspective, it's like, well, I'm distancing myself because you're doing this. But from that person who's pursuing you, it's, well, I'm pursuing you because I care about you and I feel you slipping away from me. So how do you like navigate that dynamic?
Bunch of great questions. Greg, how would you? I just put you on the spot, so you can just tell me to like
No.
go away.
No. I'd have to think about that one a little bit. You did put me on the spot, but that's okay. Tonight my mind is wandering all over the place. So
Look, these are things, by the way, I mean, I want other people to respond, of course. These are difficult subjects for people to talk about. And these are all the issues around love. So how do you, to maintain interest, excitement, enjoyment, joy with people, it means navigating the negative affects as well. Mm-hmm. So the basic Tompkins blueprint, as it's called, is you want to maximize the positive affects, minimize the negative ones. Mm-hmm. How do you do that? So far it's been mostly in art. I think with understanding affect relational theory brings more of the science into it. So, but it's always going to be a science and an art. There's never, if somebody on social media says, this is how you do it, run. Because it's not how it works. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just too nuanced, it's too complicated, there's too many variables. What you can do is have a basic understanding of how the affects work, know what distress is, know what shame is, know what the positive ones are, know how they're tied up with cultural narratives that we're born with around what it means to be in love, mm-hmm. and the need to challenge all that. So the complexity of it is immense, and we live in a world where we want everything to be simple and bite-sized, mm-hmm. and it just ain't that way.
So many people, again, cut off culture. As soon as it stops being that, people are cutting it off. But then, for some people, everyone doesn't want to get married. Everyone doesn't want to have a long-term relationship. But for the people that do, how do you get from the place of, well, I'm protecting my peace, I'm not dealing with X, Y, Z, cut it off? How does that then lead to a marriage that lasts for a long time, if that's something that person also wants?
That's a good question. Hayat, you know the answer to this one, right?
No, that's a big one. I have not gotten there, so I cannot answer it really. But to your earlier point, I think a big part of it is you recognizing that, like, you feel like you're overwhelming a part of that conversation is a big step in itself.
Can you say more about that?
Like, I think realizing that, okay, maybe I am the one who's like pulling away all the time, mm-hmm. and maybe they are starting to feel some type of way about it. Like, realizing that in itself is like the first step towards it. I think a way that you brought it up of compromise in any relationship, I think a part of that is when we do have these conversations of, okay, either we're telling them about our boundaries or anything like that, maybe creating a space so that they can then share in that same conversation how they're feeling, or if there's anything else that they want to bring up too in mm-hmm. this like open conversation, so that it doesn't just feel like you are sharing your boundaries, but maybe in the span of you indicating your boundaries, they may realize boundaries that they want to instill in their relationship. So mm-hmm. I think maybe that's like a step that can be taken to like make sure both sides feel comfortable in that conversation.
Mm-hmm. So maybe establishing with that person kind of, here are some things that I tend to do, and establishing like a way in which you communicate these things, or at least discuss sort of that type of thing ahead of time.
Yeah.
Like, talking to your partner or whoever, like, I'd like to be able to talk to these, I'd like to be able to talk about these kinds of things with you. How do we go about that? Or here's kind of how I communicate. How would that work best for you?
Because there may be aspects of you showing interest in them that they may have felt uncomfortable about, that like they just hadn't voiced. And maybe that space will allow them to also make their boundary and indicate like that this wasn't as comfortable for them.
Or it could be the opposite. It could be, and I mean, with boundaries, talk about often what I don't want you to do. But boundaries are also what I need you to do. I don't know, maybe there's a different word for it than boundary, but it's like, here's what I need you to do. So maybe for the distance pursuer dynamic, the distancer may have a need, a boundary for like space. But for the pursuer, they may have a need / boundary for like, okay, you can have space for me, but like, you know, say I love you, I need my time. Like, I just need you to say the words I love you and then go take my time. And like, that's fair. I think that we get, again, in our cutoff culture, individualistic American culture, it's very much me, me, me. And if it's not meeting my needs, then whatever, like I'm not dealing with it. But I don't know, is it valid for people to have expectations of you and like have things that they want from you in order to feel loved?
I think that's part of being in a relationship is you have expectations of each other. And I think the only way to survive in a relationship is to have those conversations. And one thing I've often said is in whatever relationship I get into, I want to make sure that we're openly and honestly communicating regularly. Because sometimes in some of my past relationships, I would just shut down and that would just make things worse.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was shutting down because I felt shamed or I shamed myself. And so I think a lot of that is about communicating and setting those expectations regularly, not just up front in the beginning, but throughout the relationship.
How do you get people to know that you mean it? I've been the one, just being a naturally very honest and blunt person. I feel like I tell people all the time, like, be that way with me too. But I feel like most people don't know that I mean it. You know what I mean? Like, you'll say, like, you can say how you feel, but then they don't really trust that you mean that. So they're not actually going to say how they feel.
I think it's a matter of continuing to build that relationship, and maybe there's a reason that is within their own, that they're having their own issue around trust issues, and maybe that's about them, and that's something they need to explore, and you can help them explore that. But I think constantly communicating and living that truth and living those expectations, walking the walk, I think makes a difference.
You know, I know that we need to wrap up here pretty soon with the commonality of what you all just said, and I think everybody had some really insightful things to say. What I heard is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the commonality of what I heard is the need for dialogue, that it needs to be open into dialogue. It needs to be safe dialogue. And the trust around that. Is it? No, I do mean it. When I said, tell me what you feel. Let's keep talking. You may not trust me initially around this.
Because some people have been hurt so often and shut down so often that they're not going to trust you. Right. It's going to take continuous efforts to get them to finally do that. Like when you beat a dog so much, you know, they become afraid of you. So I think you have to do the same thing with people.
Well, that's a great point, because also in a relationship, you're dealing with somebody who's had prior relationships for the most part, not always, but they have fantasies about prior relationships. And they bring those to it. So they bring their own fantasy life and their own expectations in hopes, right? In hopes about the word, you're going to disappoint them. And it's not always going to be about you in that sense. I mean, yes, has your name on it, but it's really not about you in the sense that you let them down. But that's because they didn't have the right expectations.
They brought something from the past to the present.
Right.
And you have no way of knowing that.
Right. So, again, that goes back to dialoguing. And lastly, around solving problems in relationships. Stop doing like that. When you tell people to stop doing something and complaining, that is not dialoguing, by the way. That's a monologue, and that's an order. People get defensive automatically. If you say, hey, can we talk about this? Let me tell you how I'm feeling. And of course I want to know how you're feeling. This is not working right now. Like, I'm just really irritated. Like, just right now, just really irritated. Because once again, you did this. But let me get some food in my belly and calm down, and then let's talk. Because I want this to work. But it's got to be a dialogue. Don't attack. If you attack and say, stop doing that, I hate it when you do this, all that sort of stuff, you're setting it up for the other person to just have to defend what they did. And then it becomes about that particular issue as opposed to what it feels like to be together. Ultimately, people want to feel good together, right? I want to know that you're interested in me and that you enjoy me. Whatever's in the way of that causes shame. Let's discover what's in the way. That's how I'd like to end, is that there really is hope around understanding how these things work. So that you can identify it and say, like, oh, yeah, I brought a lot of distress from my work and from everything else, and I really messed this up. I want to start again. I take full responsibility for being a total a-hole when I came home. Forgive me? I owe you dinner. Let's go for dinner and let's make up and let's try this conversation again. If you can't see, I'm sorry. Thank you. So forth. We're probably not going to get very far because we're all screwing up in relationships all the time, right? Mm-hmm. By definition, being in a relationship is being in a shame-based place.
Yeah. And that's any relationship, whether it's a work relationship, a friendship, loving romantic partner, it's everything.
Right. As we end here, we need to stop being ashamed of shame. We need to stop being ashamed of our shame and look at it for what it is, as a hindrance, as a barrier to connection.
Yeah. And that's probably my biggest problem is I'm ashamed of being shamed. I'm just ashamed of all that.
Well, that's what we were taught.
It doesn't feel good.
Yeah, and it makes you feel less than. Yeah, and I always feel like I had to be perfect. Mm-hmm. That's because as a black man, as a gay man, sometimes you just feel that way.
That's a good point.
But that's a whole different topic.
Yeah.
That's a whole different topic. That's the Greg topic for next week. No, but thank you for sharing that. But I think that's true. Gay, straight, bi, whatever, black,
Mm-hmm.
white.
Mm-hmm.
Shame is everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. We talked about racial issues last time. How love works with can I say it correctly? With different colorations racially, I think is an important issue. With different gender, sexual orientation issues, the complexity of it, again, we live in a world where people want everything to be simpler than it can be. These things cannot be simplified. Either step up and learn how to be more complicated,
Yes.
or stop telling yourself that you know this stuff. You don't. You don't, and you will never understand it if you don't want to put the energy and time into understanding the complexity of it. If you are frightened of complexity, do something simple. Don't do anything related to philosophy or psychology.
Don't get into serious relationships.
And don't get a serious relationship.
Stay casual.
Just keep it casual. Keep it superficial.
If that's what people prefer.
Well, and two, an important thing that I definitely had to learn how to do with whether it's a romantic relationship or a friendship or anything like that is to learn when to cut it off and say it's not worth it. Because it's very easy to get kind of feeling trapped or, and being unhappy and, but you still feel committed somehow to that person or obligated to that person. And it can be hard to know
know when to end.
Right.
Yeah, Silicon Valley, their motto that I think is still relevant is "fail fast." I think that's just true for relationships as well. If you're getting that stinky, smelly thing going on,
and that is one thing that you do learn pretty quickly is the signs of things in somebody that you don't like or that don't vibe with you, and so you know when to kind of maybe distance yourself a little bit more quickly.
But also, I feel like a part of that sometimes is as you're getting to know someone or showing interest in them, you tend to, in a way, shame yourself about certain things and hide them about yourself in those conversations, or like as you're like discussing your interest, or like you tend to move away from those. And so a part of you is keeping certain things hidden in that like relationship, or as you're trying to pursue that as like a romantic connection or even like a friendship connection.
Because you want to be the ideal partner. I mean, there's just so many dynamics in American dating, like politics or what have you. But there is the one of, I want a relationship, so I'll be the perfect partner. But then, like you're saying, you're not being honest about your actual needs or boundaries. And then what Alex is saying of, well, even though I'm feeling like I don't even want this relationship anymore, I'm going to be the ideal person, I guess, and just stick it out. And it's like, who's that for? Like, how does that help the person that you're with to be with them for an obligation? Is that what that person wants?
that's a great set of questions. And of course, there's so much complexity around it. Again, so that you just added another, both of you added, all of you added a whole bunch more complexity. We're going to end here and say that there could actually be a podcast that we might want to consider having around the shame of being alone or lonely, and how that pushes one into love relationships that are toxic.
I'm shamed constantly by friends who are like, "Why aren't you in a relationship yet?" And it's very shaming. I don't want to be.
Yeah.
And so that's an interesting topic.
So let's maybe the next one will be on.
When is it better to be alone?
When is it better to be alone?
Single and happy.
Single and happy, or fail fast. All those things. We'll use ChatGPT and come up with a good title. But I know that we're certainly capable of having great conversations around these issues. So thank you once again, everybody. This has been really exciting, and it was interesting to be with all of you. And enjoyable as always. Any last words from any of you?
No,
same to you.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Happy Black History Month.
Happy Black History Month. Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Bye.